Hello, I'm Dr. Adam Rindy, and welcome to the One Thing podcast. I'm excited today to bring on my friend and colleague, Solomon Ezra Berezin. He is going to speak with us about meditation, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Let me give you a little bit of a background before I welcome on Solomon. He's a certified transformational nutrition coach. He's a former college basketball athlete. His focus in his practice is as a coach is improving health and sports performance with mindset, meditation, nutrition, and fitness. And he's designing future visions, releasing undesired habits, and more. He is someone who's been practicing meditation for several years. And so far, he has attended and experienced 2 meditation retreats that transformed his life. And we'll be talking about those today. So I'm going to welcome on Solomon. Hey, Solomon.
Hey, how are you doing, Dr. Adam?
Good. Nice to see you again.
You as well.
Yeah, so thought we could just sort of talk a little bit about how we met first, and our friend Moses introduced us. He told me, you've got to meet this guy. He's interested in health and basketball. That was his
nice
intro.
To hear your side of the story.
And that was enough for me because those are 2 of my, obviously my interests as well. So yeah, what did he tell you?
Basically, I was just, when we were introducing, because our parents are good friends, I was just sharing how the work that I'm doing and growing in health coaching, and was interested in working alongside somebody and getting to know other people in the field like yourself. And that's how he made the connection. And he sent me your number, and then we're having a phone call.
Yeah, so then we ended up going on a hike together to a place called Poo Poo Point, which is
Point.
It has infamous name in Issaquah, Washington, and went on a very nice hike that overlooks the Puget Sound. We saw a beautiful view of Mount Rainier that day, and we had many conversations along the way, some about health and spirituality, and I felt in some sense that I was talking to a younger, more evolved version of myself, because you're going deeper in this process than I did at your age, and but it was just really an enlightening conversation.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think we wanted to set the stage for today. I think what I always like to do when we're talking about a topic that some people might not be familiar with, even though meditation is mainstream these days, is just to kind of set a structure around it. What we're going to be talking about today is meditation from a perspective of its impact on health and well-being, and mental health, physical health, emotional health, and just sort of sharing some of your experiences with meditation and how you walk people through this process. So with that being said, when was the first time you were introduced to meditation?
I actually was thinking about this recently, because I'd been practicing it daily for a little over 2 years now, maybe 2.5 years. But I got introduced to it by a very good friend. I call her like my second mother, a family friend, who I think first introduced it to me, in high school, because I had this nail biting habit, and I really I wanted to stop, but it was so subconscious that it was, nothing was kind of helping. And so from what I can remember at this moment, she just would kind of guide a little, maybe 10-minute visualization of sorts. And, here and there, it slowly grew. I fell asleep like the first few times, of course, but, then what's led to today is, a great cultivated practice that, I aspire to continue growing.
Excellent. So when people think of meditation, something
Mhm.
might come to their mind. So some people might think of meditation where you say some type of mantra over and over and over. I think that comes from the roots of transcendental meditation.
Mhm.
Some people might think of that you're supposed to clear your mind and not think of anything. Um, some people might think of actually you're supposed to do some visualization or think of certain thoughts or visions. What, how would you kind of set us up with the different kind of subtypes of meditation, and so people understand that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think also when it comes to kind of, you know, lots of things, we have to see what our preconceived notions and what we understand about it is. So when I was first getting into meditation, I was also recognizing, in different movies, you may see somebody practicing meditation or doing or talking about somebody who does meditation, and it's usually often portrayed as somebody, an Eastern religion or some, like the weird guy in the movies. Um, so the more and more you get into it, I mean, there's different approaches you have, like you mentioned, the visualization, the mantras. I haven't really tried the transcendental meditation or like focusing on different mantras. But you can focus on breath. And as I'll share later about the meditation, the Vipassana meditation retreat, a lot of it is focusing on the breath. Uh, you can focus on your sensations on the body, and then you can take it further into visualization. In the Jewish tradition, you can focus on a letter because the letter is a form of creation. Um, there's kind of it almost seems like it's boundless in what you can do with it, from focusing on an image um, to just the breath and more.
Okay. So when sort of first learning um, these particular techniques, is there sort of some schools of thought? For example, there's like the mindfulness camp, such as like the work of John Kabat-Zinn,
Hmm.
um, and sort are there sort of different schools that you can maybe help us with understanding and the differences between those schools of thought?
I'm not too sure as far as the schools of thought go. In the experience in the meditations that I've practiced, like the Vipassana meditation retreat was focused on the breath and like equanimity. So it's more so kind of, rather than focusing on those other kind of methods, it's really taking a step back and being able to observe the different thoughts and sensations that may arise on the body
Mm-hmm.
and in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that leads me to think about like someone who might be drawn to this type of meditation. Is We heard these kind of terms of people who have lots of anxiety, or um, their mind is turning constantly
Mhm.
with different thought patterns or worries or stress, and there's just sort of this sense of not being able to separate from it.
Yeah.
So you kind of, what you're saying reminds me of that, like an awareness of your, what they call the monkey brain.
Hmm. So kind of what I mentioned earlier about realizing or becoming aware of different preconceived notions, the meditation has its benefits because somebody who had, let's say, insecurity or anxiousness or some level of fear or any of those, we could say, limiting emotions or unserving behaviors that you just mentioned, a lot of it, unfortunately, has to be is we're identifying with those emotions. So somebody's feeling anxious, somebody's feeling fearful, the the thought or the reaction is, oh my God, I am anxious. And that's where the separation gets, what'd you say, kind of, it's hard to separate from it because you're declaring that. And as you learn also with meditation, the body doesn't know the difference between a thought or an actual experience. So you can create that through your thought alone. So in the meditation, you practice and you realize, oh, there's this part of me that's separate than just the thought that arise. And I don't have to identify with the thoughts that arise. You can kind of separate that, and you learn things like, oh, thoughts are transient. They come and pass away. So I don't have to identify with this feeling of anxiousness or insecurity that's arising.
Mm-hmm.
So with somebody, I think you brought up, I may have just missed it, but somebody getting started, it definitely is a process. And like I shared, I think I myself am early on in it, having done maybe 4 or 5 years. And it started off, like I mentioned, just some wonderful teacher slowly introducing what it is. And, then it turns into Headspace, or one of those. There's many apps these days. Just doing 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just kind of planting a seed, getting a little bit of an idea, but you have to continue remaining open and seeing, well, what more is there? What is this really showing me all that meditation is? And slowly may develop into more and more. Like then I began using it before basketball games, and then we started seeing how it also benefited, life off the court and in other areas of life, and just the way you would think and the perspective of which I would see life and be able to notice things a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think back to when I first learned meditation. I was on a hike with my father in Sedona, Arizona, and I was probably, I don't know, 12, 13, I don't know. And he was into meditation, and he took me up to this point in Sedona. It was like this hike, and it was overlooking this valley with these beautiful red rocks. And he sat down and he just started to breathe. And I was like, "What are you doing, Dad?" I didn't know what he was up to. And he's like, "I'm meditating." And he's like, "You should try it." And basically he told me, I asked him, "Well, how do you do it?" He said, "Breathe and try to calm your brain." And that was like step one. So like, what would be a step one? And that actually worked for me. It was simple instructions, but I think what happens a lot of times is people are told, you should try this meditation, and they say, "Well, I tried it, but I couldn't turn off my brain. It was just kind of, I'm just not good at it. Like I can't, I can't calm myself down enough." And I'd love to hear what how you guide someone who's like early on in those stages and they're just really having frustrations with that.
So I've guided a few meditations, like at a virtual talk I gave, and then with some individuals I'm working with. And I really adapted a lot from the silent meditation retreat that I experienced. And so to begin, you would usually just, close the eyes, relax, and just focus on the breath and like through the nose. So like at the retreat, and then how I'll adapt it into guiding somebody is, just focusing in through this kind of triangular area, just the inhalation and the exhalation of the breath. And whenever your focus would, wander, you would just return it to that area and see if you can observe maybe the breath. If you really focus on it, it's a lot cooler when it enters, and then a lot warmer when it exhales. And in that kind of guidance, or just even before, like, or listening to something like this, it's interesting where, like you mentioned, we have an idea that we have to turn off the brain, or I can't get calm enough. But I would argue that's actually means it's a good thing. because the point isn't to, like you mentioned also at the beginning, you're not turning off the brain, not clearing your mind. You're simply building the practice or the concentration of becoming aware of what's arising. So it's less about, turning it off and more about just noticing, because and then it kind of helps with, I don't want to say turning it off, but it lowers the volume on those thoughts that in your old self you would identify with, but they would be very loud and you would react to it, or you would get into uncompulsive behavior. So by having a focal point, like you mentioned, there were different mantras, or you could do a visualization or focusing on the breath. It's that focal point, that focus point to return your attention to whenever it may wander. And then slowly, when you're able to do that, you can notice, by becoming more of the observer of the different thoughts that may arise, which lowers the volume.
Yeah, and I think that's the essence to me. It's like all day long, we humans kind of are very goal oriented, task oriented in generally, like you clock into your job and you have this particular list of things that you need to get accomplished in a given day, and in a sense you feel some type of mastery over that. It's like, okay, as long as I put my head to the grindstone and I'm focused and I'm working hard, I'll accomplish this list of things. I'll go home and hopefully feel good about my day's work. You sit down to meditate, and it's almost like you just turn that whole model around, and it's about process and being and actually not doing. It's not about accomplishment, right? It's like a different mindset.
It kind of expands the way in which you approach your work, those other to-dos, but you're no longer going through them and checking the box. I went to work today, I picked up groceries, yada yada yada, and going through it, because then you're getting somewhere. But ultimately, where we want to get to, is now. You have those aspirations, you have those great goals. Myself as well, I'm very creative. I have a beautiful vision, of my future and things I want to experience. But if I'm, busting my butt or hustling and trying to get it, then you're kind of separate from it. So with the practice of the meditation, you really, like you said, you're less doing and more being. So then it's not really ironic, but you actually attend to those things more effectively, more productively, because you become more present, you become more in it, no longer separate to where you're going or trying to just get out of doing something.
Yeah. And so, I think anxiety disorders, or stress disorders, really, that's one of the biggest challenges is being able to separate from your fear, your insecurities, from your worries, your troubles, and being able to feel safe in the present moment. So that was really well described. I want to get into the retreat you went on in just a second, but I'd just like to kind of talk about how this plays out also with other health problems. So, for example, there's a big classification of health conditions called somatic health problems. These are like problems that involve the mind and body. So there's pain disorders that involve the mind body. There's digestive disorders that involve the mind body. Of course, insomnia and other stress problems. How would this kind of play out in health? Like, if I was to implement a meditation practice, and let's say I have like a digestive problem, how would this maybe help?
Yeah. So I'll start with the kind of reference in where I learned a lot about the science of meditation and used to explain how it'll help in this, bodily function and digest all the organ systems and so on. And that would be through the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. I know you and I mentioned it and discussed a little bit of his books, but I'd like to state that first because that's where I learned a lot of the different science to it. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, and it also complements the work that I experienced and learned at their meditation retreat, and probably even helped me when I went there because I understood about the science to it. And so the way it would help is that our body is like a kind of like an animal in a sense. It has its reactions, and I mentioned earlier that it's objective. It doesn't know the difference between a thought or a real experience. So we have different things that we react to in our environment, and that comes from the things in the past in which we unconsciously create some kind of conclusion or belief about a situation. And on a animal kind of point, an animal has to run away from a threat. It's very beneficial. So all of its attention focuses on the cause that made its internal environment, change and make it feel that it's perceiving a threat. So it uses all of its resources to get safe. But then when it's safe, it returns to homeostasis and it begins to get back into growth and repair. Ourselves, because we have our forebrain and our conscious brain has developed so much, when we come across somebody, let's say an abusive relationship or some coworker or, maybe somebody in our family, whatever, that we concluded some belief that we don't feel safe around, and we continue that thought and create that belief continuously, then we're in a sense still thinking the animal, like from the animal point of view, we're still thinking we're under threat. So the body's never really getting a chance to repair. So with the practice of meditation, you're becoming familiar with all the stuff we mentioned earlier. You're separating from your conscious brain, not really, but you're lowering the volume on it, on the neocortex, to be able, so that you're no longer reacting to all that stuff that happened before. Which means, so now if you're kind of taking yourself out of it, not really taking yourself out of it, but, lowering the volume on the conscious brain, because I know, like for myself, first hearing that, taking myself out of it, what I'm talking about, but by turning the volume down, it in a sense gives the body the chance to relax, to return to that state of growth and repair. And then that in turn, because there's these different systems, in our body, and as you even learned and you've shared with me, we have these different parts in our system correlate, illnesses or diseases that correspond to exactly that, some kind of maybe reaction or limited belief in the brain, or in the brain. So when we really kind of step out and observe it, it gives that body, the autonomic nervous system, can step in and begin to take over and heal and return the body back to a more optimal state of balance, homeostasis.
Yeah. Really well said. Yeah. So I think about, I've had a lot of discussions and even some guests on my podcast talking about the vagus nerve, and there's different branches of the vagus nerve, and the branch that sounds like you're activating is the one that's toning the parasympathetic nervous system, and helping put the brakes on that kind of fear cycle. And, I always think about people who meditate, and I think one of my early aversions to it is if I get really into this, am I just going to be so chilled out that if something happened where I actually really needed to, go into fight or flight mode, am I going to be not glued into it? And so, yeah, it was just interesting to see that actually you get, in my experience, you get better at calling.
Exactly. Yeah.
Could you speak more to that?
So kind of following on or complementing on what I was mentioning earlier, when you kind of step back and allow the autonomic nervous system to take over, to heal, then parts of your brain are also communicating a lot more clearly. If they've showed brain scans that somebody may be thinking, having feelings of depression and thinking of the past, or anxiousness thinking in the future. It's similar on the brain scan, and it's when it's that way, you're more in a convergent focus. So the parts of the brain aren't communicating as properly because you are telling your body and it's in a state of threat, a state of survival. So by practicing the meditation and building your concentration, building your focus, allowing yourself to kind of get out of the way, the brain begins to communicate more clearly. The medulla oblongata, I think I pronounced that correctly, begins, or the gray matter even begins to expand, to increase. So then you have circuits steering more clearly. So then, in like what you just mentioned, we think that maybe we'll be just so blissed out. Actually, we're more aware of our environment. We're more aware and picking up different minute details. So we're actually going to be able to respond a lot more effectively to that, especially more and more with practice.
Yeah. And, I think when you're in a constant mode of stress, meaning like you wake up, and I'm as guilty as anybody, so this is not coming from a place of, me judging this, is you wake up, you pound the coffee, you get the kids out the door, you get in your car, you go to in the commute into the traffic, you get to your work, your boss has a stack of things on your desk that you didn't prepare for the day. You're running late to your meetings. It's like, go, stress. That's all you know. You can actually become so hooked into that you feel actually awkward if you step out of it. And I think that's one of the aversions to meditation is like this kind of adrenaline need. And then if you sit down to meditation, you just, like you said in the beginning, you fall asleep. You're like, wait, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. But actually, maybe that is what you're supposed to be doing in the beginning.
Because we get so stuck to our routines. We are habitual kind of creatures. So if we continuously do those, same behaviors, and we're thinking the same way, we're doing the same things, nothing's going to change, and the brain isn't going to change at all either. So by taking the time to, practice this and step out, you become familiar of those different ways in which you've been thinking, behaving, and feeling, which then allows for the brain to kind of consolidate all that you've been doing and realize, wow, I've been doing this, I've been doing the same things, thinking the same ways. Nothing, if I do that, nothing in my life will change, or anybody's life. So
it's almost like those pathways become automatic, and you lose the flexibility and the creativity and the plasticity.
And we've kind of become programmed to do the same things.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it allows for a greater awareness to then realize, maybe, I've been doing something. We often get to a point where we want something in our life to change. Like myself, when I was transitioning from playing basketball in college and studying business, and realized, that I was more passionate about the health and the process that went into, like, becoming a great athlete. The meditation and journaling is another thing, but allowed for myself to kind of step back and build that awareness to realize, oh my gosh, I've been doing this, my whole life and thinking the same way about it. And I've had similar experiences turn up or arise from that. So in a sense, as I began to practice more and more, I realized, become aware of the ways that I've been doing, the things that I've been doing, the way that I've been feeling about all that I've been doing, going to school, playing basketball. And, I no longer wanted to live by those emotions and think those same ways. So it really allowed for that, like I said, build an awareness to realize all that I had been habitually doing, so that now I can change.
Yeah. That makes sense. So I'd like to
Which
go
is
in.
liberating because, like you mentioned earlier, it's hard to separate from those emotions that we have been feeling, those thoughts that we often think because we often continue doing the same thing, and we want something in our environment or our life to change, but really it's ourselves that needs to change. And once we change that, we see more opportunities, we see other possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, at its core, to change, you have to think different and do things different, right? So, it just doesn't kind of happen. You have to be an active participant in that process, and it's really interesting. I remember you saying this on the hike about how you became more self-referring in your thought process, like um, where maybe before your thoughts or your beliefs were automatic based on the environment you were in or what have you, or the environment you came up in. And then you started asking yourself, like, what do I really feel and think about this?
Yeah.
Which is, when I interact with you, you can really see that this is something that's coming from you, not just something that you're kind of repeating.
Relaying, yeah.
So that's really good. I'd like to dive into the basketball kind of topic a little bit more, because you and I share a lot of past background in the sport of basketball. And to me, basketball has always been more of an art, and like it's like music to me, like the court and the rhythm of it and the energy. To me, it was just it when you were out there playing, it was like a performance of like movement, art, dance. And one of the things about meditation that connects here is that it's like a practice. Like, what that means is that you're practicing this on a daily basis for real world scenarios where you actually need to be present, you need to be mindful, you need to stay calm, you need to be centered, you need to access your resources, whether it's in life, work, with family members, with conflicts. So it's actually a practice. And so it reminds me of like someone we both have a fondness for, like Kobe Bryant, and may he rest in peace. And the fact is that Kobe would say, you should practice as if you're playing, in the real thing. Like, you don't want to just like meditate when everything's just right. Okay, like,
Yeah.
I got a good night's sleep. I had a great day yesterday. I feel really good and happy today. Like, can you talk about that? Like, this kind of, I don't want to call it
You never want
mentality.
the feelings. You never want the feelings to be the marker for change, because our feelings often change.
Wait,
It's
say
they're
more about
transient.
that. Say more about that.
If we allow, our feelings to be our feelings have a place, of course. There's the whole like facts versus feeling and feelings versus facts. People, you'll hear, facts don't care about your feelings, but neither do your feelings care about your facts. And you have to, of course, honor them. But if we put too much emphasis on them, like we want something to change in our life, and you feel good, so I don't need to meditate today. Then you're making that the mode for change, which, as you know, then something in the environment may arise that knocks you back off balance, and how do you respond to it?
Yeah, and I think this is an important point because you're pointing out that making the choice to not meditate on a good day, and I'm making the point to um,
That as well,
not
yeah.
to not only meditate on a good day. So,
Yeah.
like in this real world practice of meditation, it's like you step up, you try to do it every day as best you can, and on the difficult days, or even on the good days when you're like, I don't need this. This is what I would say really pays off. What do you think about that?
You really got to just fall in love with doing it. Whether it's a sport or an instrument or writing or speaking, you just got to love that process, that practicing of it, which, of course, when you're first starting out, like in myself, it took a little bit of time to really, well, I can't actually, not too much, but to really like just fall in love with doing it no matter what, without even having that kind of internal conversation. Do I need to do it today? Or any of that. It's like not even a question anymore. It's become like, do you use the bathroom each day? Yeah, of course. So like, it's just become something like that. So if we allow the feeling, if it's a good day and or a bad day, or whatever that means, not, you also kind of learn to reframe. There's no such thing as a good day or a bad day. There may be a pleasant day or an unpleasant day, but all days are good. And I think that reframe also helps with getting up early and making the time for yourself to do it, because the more and more you practice it and really just learn more about it as well, the study about it and how it benefits you, and you can add more meaning to it, you'll start to see a lot and experience a lot of the benefits in your health, and health in the whole, in its whole term.
Yeah. So, um, so I think a lot of people are in the process of always making changes. This is kind of one of these things that I think can, if people develop a practice, they can sort of observe their choices throughout the day. Like, for example, choosing to stay up later instead of going to bed when they know they need to get rest, or choosing to have those, sort of stress eating behaviors, when they could choose something else because they're present with their mind and body process. So it's really, really exceptional. So when I was going through naturopathic medical school, a bunch of my colleagues would go, kind of come up to me and say, "Hey, do you want to go on this retreat? We're not gonna talk for like 10 days. Do you want to go on this retreat with us?" And I always passed on it. I just,
Mm-hmm.
to me, I had done some similar types of retreats, but nothing that involved sort of being in a contemplative state for that long of time. You chose to go on one of these retreats. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah. So in December 2019, I think it was the beginning of the month, I went to this 10-day silent meditation retreat. I had a friend that went there before, and like the year before that, and I had been interested in it. And I think I met up with him in the summertime, and he just told me about it. And you sign up to be on the waiting list, and I happened to go, and I had that very good family friend who I mentioned at the beginning also highly encouraged it, and she's been on a bunch. So I felt very supported and safe in going into that, because it can be very intense, for the reasons that, like you said, you're there quiet, you're silent, and you're experiencing yourself for probably one of the first times in such a raw state. You don't have your phone, or anything, or any really belongings. I chose to kind of sneak in my journal and like my prayer book, the sitter and tefillin. But as you read in my um, kind of, I shared with you a few of the journal entries I wrote. Um, I learned a lot about myself towards those objects as well. But in that process, like you said, it was the first time I was, with myself, like, completely. Of course, you're definitely safe because you're in an ideal environment, um, away from, the city. You're with other people, but you're kind of in a state of as if you're by yourself, because people, it's serious work. It's light in a sense, because you're learning about yourself and your body. You're giving your body a chance to heal, but it's also it's serious work, because some people really have some traumatic experiences that working through it can be very, very turbulent. But the process, would you like me to now dive into really what went into it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first 3 days, you have to, like, it started in the evening because you pass all your belongings and stuff. But the first 3 days was really to learn the concepts of, like, building the awareness and having equanimity of mind. And so we started the first 3 days just focusing, like, on this triangular area. I think I mentioned earlier when you were talking about getting into the meditation. But when you really want to build concentration, you want to start on, like, a small point. Just like also if you're playing basketball, before you go straight into, layups and shooting threes, you just dribble the ball or do a close-up layup. Or playing the instrument, you're just starting with a few keys. But it's really building the concentration. And for 3 days, for 10 and a half hours in the each day, from 4:30 to 6:30, then you had, like, breakfast, and then there was, like, an hour for lunch, and an hour for like a fruit and tea, and then, like, a lecture in the evening. But those first 3 days, we would just focus on that area and the inhalation and exhalation, and see if you could even notice any sensations in that area. It was my first time really kind of practicing it. I had been practicing Dr. Joe's meditation, so I had built a practice, but I even still wasn't so aware of different sensations on my nose. But it was really to build that practice of, whenever you are aware, you're building the awareness of the breath and the sensations in that area. And whenever your mind would wander, returning it there. But one of the main key components, the equanimity that you brought up, is that levelness and calmness of mind and objective view of objective judgment of where your mind wanders, the sensations on the nose, the breath. It's just like a scientist taking an experiment. He's boiling water in the beaker. He's not reacting, oh my God, that's hot. He's aware of
observing.
it. He's observing it, exactly. And after those first 3 days, because that really hones in and builds on those main components, then we slowly move to the fourth day through the end, from the top of the head, where, like, I forgot the scientific name of it, but where it's a little soft spot.
The pineal gland.
Not the pineal gland, on the skull.
Oh, the fossa.
Like something like that, yeah. And it's like the softer spot where we place our tefillin as well. And we would just observe and go down slowly from that top of the head all the way down to the toes, and then toes back up. And you would build that practice of noticing when your attention, where your thoughts may go, and just returning it to the sensations on the body. And just notice where, if you have this thought, where is it arising on the body? And become aware of, oh, there might be a lot of tension in a certain area of the body, but not reacting to it. That's the equanimity part. Just becoming aware, and oh, it's gross, or it's feeble, it's intense, or it's highly intense, and it's moderate, it's unpleasant, it's pleasant. Nothing about good, bad, because that would evoke a reaction, and then you would get rid of it. So like myself, I mentioned at the beginning, I had a nail biting habit growing up. So when I'm going through this process, and from most of the day out of my habitual routine, and I'm no longer, I'm sitting still, and I have thoughts that usually would evoke this reaction to bite my fingernails, and I'm no longer doing it. Like, it was very intense in the wrists and the hands, when normally I would resist that. But now I'm simply just observing it and noticing how it's very intense, but I'm not averting it. I'm not, or craving something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just allowing it as it is, or I'm just observing it as it is, which allows it, like we mentioned earlier, with kind of stepping about, to heal, to allow all of those emotions and thoughts to arise so that they can pass away. And like pus coming out of wound, it gets very intense right before, it kind of clears and frees. So that's kind of like the main process that kind of went into, or like the main technique that went into it.
Mm-hmm.
And by stepping out, by practicing this equanimous approach, noticing things arise and pass away, and you're not reacting to them, it allows for this kind of healing to take place. And then the brain is connecting a lot more, you're thinking a lot clearer, your body is arriving and returning more to the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And release happens. And
Yeah, it reminds me of like being caught in a riptide in the ocean. The instructions are to not struggle and not swim against what's happening, even though you feel like you're being swept up into this dangerous place, and then before you know it, you're kicked out of the riptide and in peaceful waters.
yeah,
That was really beautifully said.
it was like that the first few days, for sure. That's when it was very intense.
But it's like, it's easier said than done, obviously. Like, that is essentially what happens in anxiety, is those thoughts rise, those future possibilities rise, and they become our reality. And so the separation between the future and the present becomes mushed together.
Mm-hmm.
And
I like to look at it kind of like a tree. Like the thoughts that we have throughout the day are like the branches, and like even the leaves, or the smaller branches. But a lot of those thoughts, like what's the source of which they arise out of? For myself, maybe it was a lot of insecurity or uncertainty. And depending on, there's also maybe individual may have thoughts that are based out of fear or frustration. So by practicing the awareness and the concentration, and no longer judging it by the equanimity, then it allows you kind of to trace back to that source, and allow that that emotion, where it's all based out of, to arise and then pass away. So you're not thinking from a place of fear or a limited emotion, but more from a place of wholeness and safety and health.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, one of the things that, as I'm talking with you, I know that you help a lot of people with various areas of health, but you and I have talked how you want to help people with meditation, right? That's
Hmm.
kind of one of the ways you want to coach people, guide people, lead people. So, are you actively doing that these days with trying to kind of helping people get connected to meditation?
Yeah, the I definitely am growing with that and want to be able to guide it more and share it more and all the benefits. And of course, I'm learning a lot more about it myself. The different individuals that I have been helping, as well as with the like talk that I've given, or when I just share with somebody, it's another tool, an element of which to help with your health or goals or whatever. Because let's say what you want to be healthy, or like you're sharing, even somebody had maybe a digestive problem, we may think our only way to address it is via nutrition or some other approach, or fitness, you name it, something external. But with the meditation, it adds another element to approach it, and may even help achieve your health goals, or just be a healthier person, or whatever the vision is,
Yeah.
by showing a more expansive approach to it.
Yeah, and I think like anything, I always encourage people not to be overwhelmed by starting it. And even just like a few minutes a day could be a good starting point. Also, like people don't realize, but I mean, you can meditate while you're in line at a store. You can meditate, when you're waiting in a car, to pick your kids up from school. You can meditate, when you're in the shower. Like you can find these little moments. It doesn't have to be kind of like the
Yeah.
classic, like I'm sitting on this mat in a room that has like candles lit and everything doesn't have to be perfect. Like I was saying, like learning how to bring meditation into your day-to-day moments. Um,
That's the continuous arrival, to be able to live in that state.
mhm, that makes
The
sense.
and the practice, I mean, but it is challenging, especially with all the different external stimuli throughout a day, from your phone to just things you could pay attention to in any given moment. So that's where the practice of the meditation really is beneficial, because you're closing out that sensory information, like the visual information and audio, to be
Yeah,
able to so when then it's closing out all those other stimuli that may come in, so then you can practice it and really build that, so then when you step out into the day, you've already practiced it a little bit to build that muscle.
yeah. I'm just gonna throw up here a comment by Matt. Um, and
Walks in nature.
he likes to walk in nature, and I think there is like some meditative practices that are all involved with walking meditation. In fact,
Hmm.
I know there's some teachers out of Vietnam and other schools that I've seen that will actually teach walking meditation. And there was a time during the shutdown um, that I was in my town in Bellevue, and for the first time, I was in this trail by my house that I could not hear any cars or noise because everybody was kind of shut down. It was the most peaceful surprise for me because I, I I was able to completely connect with my community without having to
Hmm.
drive an hour or two away. But yeah, I agree with Matt here that a walk, connecting with the fresh air, the trees, the beauty. So yeah, these are all really good things. So if I'd really like to spend the last part of our conversation kind of hearing first about how people can work with you. Um, I as we were speaking, I can think of several people that would really need to be led into this space, and they've shared with me that they want to learn how to meditate, it's just not their true nature, or they just don't think it's their true nature. Also, I want to hear like maybe some take-home messages before we go. But if you could first just kind of share like your website, tell us a little bit about your podcast. I was a guest on your podcast.
You were.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I'd love to hear just more about like how people can get in touch with you, and then maybe some take-home messages.
Yeah. Anyone you may know, you can of course forward me. You have my number. My email, or you can go to my website, solomonezra.com, SOLOMONEZRA.com, and you can either email me through there, or I think that's probably the best way, or just referred through you. I have a podcast, Ebb and Flow, EBB and Flow, and it's really based on that state that I would get into as an athlete, that state of flow, and learning from top individuals like yourself, and in physical and mental health and spiritual health, to really be able to cultivate and live in that state of flow, or that meditative state where we're not reacting, like I was talking about at their meditation retreat, to the different thoughts that may arise, and taking that on a grander scale to our whole life, where we're not reacting to simple things like somebody may cut us off, or God forbid, car accidents. We're in such a great state, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, that we handle those and we respond to them effectively without judgment. So just like, as an athlete, I would turn the ball over, but whenever I would be in the state of flow, I wouldn't react to it, and ultimately it would turn into something better that I couldn't even imagine at the time, if I were to react to the turnover, or the quote unquote negative situation. So that's really what the podcast is about.
Excellent. Well, I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and to my listeners, I think you guys are you are experiencing someone who's going to be really out there helping a lot of people, and he'll probably be on a lot of podcasts in the future, and you'll be hearing about him, because I know a good one when I see him, and I have really a lot of joy and hope for our future with practitioners like Solomon out there trying to help the world. So thank you for sharing this time with us, and look forward to kind of seeing you develop and learning more about the different practices that you teach people.
Thank you so much, Adam. All your compliments and dear words are very, very meaningful, and it definitely it hits home. So thank you so much.
You bet.
God willing, can continue to share the message and the practice, because it's just it's brought so much joy and light to my own life and people that I know, and just want to continue sharing and giving.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you.